Hamiatam, Natawan, Rudy Ortega, Nononi Tomiar, Pasivitam, Betavitam. Atawan, Mark Villaseñor, Richard Ortega, Atawan. Hello everyone, my name is Rudy Ortega. I'm the tribal president of the Fernandeño Tataviam Band of Mission Indians. I'm with my cousin Mark Villaseñor and Richard Ortega, who are also on our tribal leadership. Today we would like to acknowledge all the first peoples, our ancestors of the land of Fernandeño Tataviam from all the villages across Los Angeles, along with our cousins, our neighboring relatives of the Gabrielino Tongva and the Chumash peoples. Being that it's spring, we'd like to welcome you all and bless with the song of a bear song. Hunwut is the bear in our language, under Serrano language, and we'd like to sing that song for you.
What sera no hunga no sera. 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 What sera no hunga no sera.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm Evan Meyer, Executive Director at Theodore Payne Foundation. It's an honor to have you here. It's an honor to have that beautiful bear song and land acknowledgement from President Ortega and the Fernandeño Tataviam Band of Mission Indians. And we want to acknowledge the indigenous peoples of California and their deep ecological knowledge and culture, which is intertwined with the plants that we'll be discussing over the next 3 days. I'm so excited for what's in store. We're just getting started tonight. This is going to be an amazing weekend. Thank you so much for being here. This is going to be a different tour than normal. This is our 18th annual tour. The 2021 tour will be completely different, but the message is more important than it's ever been. Native plants are the future for Southern California. These plants are much better for the environment. They use less water. They don't require chemical fertilizers. They require much less pesticide. They have a shorter supply chain, less of a carbon footprint. But most importantly, the product of the native plant garden, the thing that you're building with the native plant garden, is the environment itself. And we can choose to build an environment that restores nature, that restores biodiversity, that restores the indigenous ecology of Southern California, the place that we all live. So this is an important message, and I'm glad that you're here with me to explore that over the course of this weekend. This has been a big project. It's, as you'll see, it was very ambitious. I'm very excited with what the team has done. And right off the top, I want to take some time to introduce the people who made this possible. So I'm going to start with the visual mastermind who has shot many hours of footage. We've done over 30 individual days filming, countless late nights editing, just an incredibly ambitious time frame for this project. That is Marie Astrid Gonzalez. It's been wonderful to work with her. Hi, Marie. Say hi to everybody. We have clapping from Sean Marie. I think you're on mute, but thank you. It's been an absolute joy and honor to work with Marie. I'm going to go around. You'll see Marie throughout the weekend. I'll introduce everyone else. Our editors, Vaughn Kirby and Bruce Guido. Bruce is still editing right now. This, as you'll see, the video is absolutely exquisite and beautiful and shows native plants in a light that they've very rarely been seen. We have our technical team here, Scott Scher and Andrew Chavez, who are going to do everything they can to make sure that nothing breaks down over the next 3 days. Everyone cross your fingers because we're sort of dealing with a situation that who knows what will happen, but we'll do our best. They are here. If you have any questions, Scott is there to answer. We have Katie Tilford, who is answering all our chats. This is a conversation, so please use the chat function liberally, ask questions, tell your take on things. What are you thinking? Chat amongst each other. This is all about connecting and exploring and enjoying native plants together. And finally, we have my wonderful co-host, who you'll be hearing a lot of throughout the next 3 days, Erin Johnson, who is our outreach manager. She has project managed a lot of this program that you'll see this weekend, has been there since the creative inception through everything, sent out 1 million emails and 1 million Google Calendar invites, and such an honor to be here with her. Erin, we made it. Hi.
We made it. Thanks so much, Evan. It's been such an honor to be a part of the garden tour team this year. And over the course of this weekend, we are going to tour 8 landscapes across Los Angeles County and introduce you to the extraordinary plants that have lived here for thousands of years and evolved to thrive with our climate and soil, and also co-evolved with our local wildlife. And to do this, we're going to be sharing HD footage, and it's going to be narrated by the homeowners, the landscapers, designers, community leaders, land managers, and that create and sustain these incredible spaces. And so on Saturday, we're going to see 4 of these gardens. And then on Sunday, we're going to see the next 4. And we're also going to have a roundtable discussion each day as well. And then to bring us home for the final presentation, we're so honored to have Professor Doug Ptolemy, author of Bringing Nature Home. And he is going to give our final presentation, and he has been a huge inspiration to all of us at TPF and one of the leaders of the native plant movement. So we're really, really excited to welcome him on Sunday. But tonight, we are going to take a look at the future of Los Angeles with this visionary panel that Evan is about to introduce. And we are going to have a beer tasting with Eagle Rock Brewery, my favorite brewery. And we are also going to have live music and experimental video. And of course, none of this would be possible without the very generous support of our sponsors. And this year's Oak sponsors are the Gottlieb Native Garden and LA Native Plant Source, which are 2 just visionary organizations that have devoted themselves to the ecosystem of our region. And if you want to learn more about them, you can find them on our website, as well as the many, many other organizations that have pitched in to support us and to make this really huge project happen this year. So we're very, very grateful. And also on the website, you can find 360 videos. It was just refreshed last night. So if you haven't seen it in the past 24 hours, you'll find that each garden now has its own landing page, and again, those 360 tours and interviews with the people behind the garden. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Evan.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, there is just an amazing amount of content that we've put together, and it's all for this mission of Theodore Payne Foundation to celebrate the plants around us, to think about our landscape differently, and to be part of nature rather than outside of it. And so this is a shift that to many of you watching probably feels very obvious, but to much of the world, that's a new concept. So we are hoping that through this content, we can share this message more broadly, which we need to do. We need to bring new people in, more diverse communities. And we'll be hearing a lot about that over the next several days as well. Of course, gardens are meant to be experienced in person. That is one of the joys of being a gardener, is being out in nature. And of course, we would have loved to have done that this year. The tour takes about a year to plan typically. This year, we did it in the course of 6 months. So it was very condensed. And we made the decision late 2020 that we had to do it in this format. And when we made that decision, we decided, let's use this medium to share the message in a different way. So this is not our first online garden tour. If you were here with us in 2020, you'll know that we did a last minute grassroots version of a Zoom garden tour, the first time I ever used Zoom. And we had over 30 gardens showcased. Margaret Oakley and Philip Otto, who beautifully coordinated the tour for many years, as their final version of the tour was this wonderful sign of resilience of the native plant community in the very early days of the pandemic, when the world was totally scary and strange. Of course, a year has passed. We've all gotten used to this way of life. And I do hope that these two garden tours can bookend this experience of being at home. And next year we will be together in person, seeing gardens as they're meant to be seen. That being said, I'm actually very proud of what has happened. And so when we knew that things had to be virtual this year, we knew there were certain new ways of telling the story that got us really excited. The first of those is that we can share the seasons in a new way. And so we'll be seeing that over the next couple of days. Typically, garden tours happen when there's this burst of brilliance and exuberant flowering, and everyone waits all year for that. And it's an amazing time of year. We're in that right now. But there's much more in the life of a garden. And so you'll be able to see winter gardens and celebrate that negative space when the annuals are just starting to germinate. You'll be able to celebrate that first flush of growth on a California native plant, those early flowering manzanitas and California lilacs that are so beautiful. And then we'll transition that footage into spring, that exuberant growth. And then we'll come back. So we hope you'll all join us again later this year when we come back in summer and show these plants as they go dormant and go dry, which is a typical cycle. And this is all embodied in the shirt that I'm wearing, our garden tour shirt, the Humboldt lily. Humboldt lilies spend most of their year underground as a geophyte, an earth plant, also known as a bulb. And they, as the rains come, they sprout and grow several feet to quite a few feet tall with beautiful whorled leaves, flowering in the early summer and then setting seed to go dormant again underground. And that beautiful seasonality is something that we want to explore and celebrate because it's such an amazing part of being a native plant gardener, is connecting to the seasons and feeling them at an instinctual level. The other beautiful thing about this format is the narrative, the people. We have been all around the city filming, meeting, talking, having discussions, and it's almost a sense of crowdsourcing our own narrative and writing our own narrative together and connecting to tell the story the way we want to tell it so that we can be more impactful and more inclusive and more open. And you will get that this weekend. So you can already go and see interviews with the amazing garden homeowners and designers and people who maintain these gardens. And over the next 2 days, we'll have long form interviews with all of these gardens, which is really amazing. And it's almost this process of forming a collective vision together that if we talk about these ideas enough, a new vision will coalesce and we'll start to head somewhere that is better, because I think all of us can agree that things need to change in the landscape. We're not on a sustainable path. We are not on an ethical path. And so we need to change things. And that is what this process, all being here together, watching the same beautiful images, listening to the same words, we can start to develop that path as a community. And so your voices are so important. Anyone who's an attendee, please use the chat. But tonight we've assembled a panel that I'm so excited about. 4 individuals who represent very different parts of the native plant community and the landscape community at large. These are 4 people who I look up to and who inspire me. 4 people who grew up in Los Angeles or nearby, so they are fluent in this landscape. It's their childhood landscape and they've grown up with it. I'm going to ask them to envision a future city and ask them to paint that picture with words. In 50 years, where will we be? And we want to think, what then do we need to do to get there? And that's what we're going to try to cover tonight. So I want the chat to be contributing a lot here. We'll get to Q&A at the end. At the beginning, we're just going to kind of organically have a conversation, but I'm going to start alphabetically asking each of these wonderful panelists to share a little bit about their perspective, who they are, and where they envision Los Angeles being in 50 years. So I'm going to start with Naomi Fraga, the Director of Conservation Programs at California Botanic Garden, my former boss, a top-notch botanist, conservationist, someone who has just done so much to preserve the rare flora of California and maintain ecology in the local environment. So welcome, Naomi. Thanks for coming out tonight, and I'll pass it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Evan. I don't know how long you'll introduce me as your former boss for. That's fun. It was great working with Evan. for that time we worked together. I've been a botanist for over 20 years now, focusing on the flora of California. I've really done all my studies in primarily Southern California. And I think about, when I think about Los Angeles, I think about a lot about my childhood and upbringing and sort of my transition of being someone who was ignorant of plants to someone who then has become a botanist, and their world is totally enveloped in California native plants, and it totally permeates every part of my being. And so I'd like to see a future for people in Los Angeles, for Southern California, where everyone has the opportunity at an early age to access nature and native plants, and it's more integral in our society in an everyday way, where, I mean, it definitely is much more now than it was when I was growing up. You know, native plant gardens weren't as common in the 80s and in the 90s as they are now. And I think a lot more people can come into the native plant community, and it's a lot more accessible than it was when I was growing up. But I wanted to see that like times 10, and everyone had the ability to know about their local nature, because it's just, I feel like it's so integral to your place, to where you're at. To not know about the plants of your region is to just, in some way, to be, you know, disconnected from where you're living. So that's one thing I'd really like to see in the future.
Thank you, Naomi. Yes, it's amazing. When I moved to Southern California and found that people had never been to the mountains before and didn't know that they could go there, that was really an epiphany, that there's a lot of work to do of just making people feel comfortable with nature around them.
Yeah, you know, I grew up maybe 10 minutes from the Angeles National, not 10, 15, but very close to the Angeles National Forest, to some waterfalls like Fish Falls and Azusa Canyon area. And I had been to Crystal Lake a couple of times as a kid to see the snow, but really it wasn't a place that I knew that I could just visit and learn and explore and, you know, be in the forest. So, yeah. Okay,
so we're going to try to combine all these threads as we move along here. We have the need for people to grow up in this region, connecting to the land in a more meaningful and holistic way. This is vision part 1. So everyone keep that in mind. I'm next going to go to have David Godshall introduce himself. David is the founder and owner of Terremoto and Plant Material Nursery. And if you're unfamiliar with that work, Terremoto does beautiful landscape architecture, and they're really looking at landscape architecture through a new lens, which I think is really exciting. And Plant Material is an amazing nursery that has just an amazing selection. And they've done an amazing job of making these plants and gardens and ideas trendy in a way, I would almost say. If you don't mind me, David, saying that. But
Sure.
David, let's pass it over to you and tell us a little bit about your perspective and your vision.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. And Naomi and Evan and everybody at Theodore Payne, just wanted to say thank you for all that you do. But I guess I'll just dive into it. I have a landscape architecture studio called Terremoto, and we have an offices in San Francisco and also Los Angeles, and we do work in both places. And yeah, how do I get into it in terms of imagining what LA will look like in 50 years? I guess I would start by qualifying that I'm an optimist. And I believe that the rewilding of our cities is hopefully one of the coming like revolutions that happens like in the decades that are going to follow us. I think that to be the guy that gets meta, I'll keep it brief, my meta part brief, but I believe we exist like in this kind of awkward transitional moment right now where like as a culture and a civilization, we are kind of like realizing that historical institutions have failed us, whether that's, I don't know, the news media, tech, finance, all these things. And I think as like a collective, I feel like there's this growing like consensus that like now is the time to throw away like the I guess inanity and bullshit of like past models of living. And I think that like landscape design is part of that. I think historically speaking, the way we've designed our gardens, if you look at Southern California almost uniformly, we native people or native gardens exist. But it's still monolithically mostly like people are mostly still making gardens in a post-war idiom that is terribly, frighteningly irrelevant and obsolete. And I think that there's like this awakening, and I'm optimistic that there's like this awakening going on right now, and T-Pain is at the crux of it. And I don't know, it's a fascinating moment. And so I think that I'm hopeful that we can kind of begin like this kind of like almost garden level residential and or small commercial or whatever. I won't get into the details, but that we can start this kind of like ecological revolution through like destroying our lawns, and in doing that, shaking off like the cultural and terrible baggage of the past, and then that's a way forward. And I think the way for our community of people to go about doing that, I would say, is like not to be the guy that talks about like love, but like is by like showing people that like native gardens and or partly native, edible focused, regionally appropriate gardens are just better, and almost like winning people over through building gardens that almost appeal to their sense of desire rather than charity. Yeah, so that's kind of like part of the mission of what I do at Terremoto, and but also kind of how I'm hopeful for the future, in a way. Did I go too deep? I'm sorry.
That's fantastic. And so thread number 2, I'm just going to say love. Love is, so we have knowledge, awareness, and love. We're coming at this with love, with open arms, with welcoming and embracing. And that may be a little bit of a shift in terms of how we talk and how we think about what we're doing, is that this is just better than the other option. So of course you're going to do it. It's just a better way to do things, right? Okay, so we have those two threads starting right there. I like this. I like where we're headed. Our third speaker tonight is Sophie Pennis, who is the founder of Urban Farms LA. Sophie is a wonderful activist who is very interested in climate, and I met her because she was talking to her local political leaders about street trees, and does amazing outreach about the environmental impact of gardening. And she has this business where she can combine that kind of outreach and advocacy and environmental ethic with vegetable and native plant gardening. So welcome, Sophie. Thank you for being here. And I will ask you to say hi and introduce your vision.
Hey, Evan. Thanks for having me. My name is Sophie. I have a business called Urban Farms LA. We design, install, and maintain edible gardens and native gardens, which is sort of a newer track for us. And in terms of my vision for the future of LA, I mean, so much of what David said, I'm just like, yes, that's how I feel. But to me, the most important is to mitigate the worst effects of climate change, which we are running out of time to do. And in terms of what David said about rewilding, not only rewilding our cities, but our state and our country and globally. And when you think about rewilding, it seems important to sort of concentrate the scope of human impact. And one way we could do that, and what I think about a lot, because I'm sort of like, I originally came from the world of edible gardening, is to bring farms back into cities. And so my business is called Urban Farms LA, but I'm really just building gardens. But bringing farms into cities and allowing sort of like the central valley and like the central coast of California to rewild, to return to like native grasslands, and to stop extracting what we're doing there, and extracting, depleting the soil, and creating like fertilizer runoff. To me, is such a big way to combat climate change, in kind of an obvious way. Although obviously there's like a lot of socio-political things that go into that, but bringing food back into cities and placing, it requires placing more of a value on our food and where it comes from. And that is a big part of my vision for the future of our city, and all cities, really. So
I think that theme of decentralizing is going to be really important in this conversation, and we'll kind of hang out there for a second, because I know, Naomi, what Sophie was just talking about of bringing food growing into our urban and residential space. I'm going to take this in another direction in energy production. In the Mojave Desert, pristine wilderness is being turned into giant solar farms. And meanwhile, here in the city of Los Angeles, we have miles of rooftops and parking garages and all sorts of areas. So I wonder if you can talk about decentralization and its potential as a path towards a better vision for the future of our city.
Yeah, certainly. I think that the way society currently operates is very extractive, and sort of, we created this, we have this really vast swath of land that is heavily urbanized, and we've done lots, there's been lots of modification to the landscape, and to continue to support this megalopolis, this enormous place that requires a lot of energy, we're then now industrializing other natural areas to supply energy, and having to have that energy be transmitted via transmission lines, rather than allowing urban areas to be more sustainable. So I like what Sophie said about food, and sort of integrating food and food production within urban areas, and also energy production, to think about this idea of how we can be more self-sustaining. We import water, we import energy, we import food, and why can't we we can produce all those items here, or we can be more mindful of resources. And I think it's also to live within your means and understand what the area you live in can provide, and how you can be more innovative in terms of and less extractive. So think towards innovation to reduce extractive use. And yeah, I think we're just in industrializing the desert and other locations, and just continued urban sprawl, we're just repeating all the same mistakes, in terms of how various things have been built up in the first place, that we've created an environment that's not very permeable in terms of like water filtration, and just having green space and exposing ourselves to nature. And in doing that, I feel like we've had this idea that we're disconnected from nature, or people don't necessarily see how they're a part of nature. Like humans, we're always kind of taking ourselves out of the picture, like we're somehow separate from nature, but we're very much integrated in nature. We're a part of nature, and that is very much manifested in like how we impact ecosystems very broadly, globally, right? And so I think if we are able to sort of I really love that term, rewilding, and doing that process, you recognize your connection to nature much stronger, and how your actions can, you see that reciprocation of you treat the land in a certain way, it provides for you, and you also provide back for the land.
Yes, and that individual connection, it's asking a lot, like there's no doubt about it. And we've gone around the city documenting people who do grow their own food, and who do create, they've rewilded their piece of land. We had a really good point in chat that a lot of people don't have land, they don't have space to garden. And isn't this an elitist view? And I would push back and say, it doesn't have to necessarily be at a piece of property that you own. We could have many more community garden spaces. And I know, David, you've been involved in some interesting community projects in terms of trying things out and experimenting. I wonder if you could talk a bit about some of that work that you've done.
Sure. And I think that's a totally fair point that commenter made, and one that we have to be thoughtful of and like inclusive of as we like go about this journey. Well, one thing that we're doing, one thing that Terremoto is actively involved in is called Test Plot, and it's essentially our office used to be in Echo Park, and Elysian Park is right next to Echo Park, and many of the people in our office are regular users of Elysian Park, and if you're unfamiliar with it, it's a public park that's in an ecologically bad way, in that it's a zombie forest of dead eucalyptus and invasive species dominating the Grand Plain. And we just got frustrated, and we kind of did this thing. It's called Test Plot. We got kind of tepid, lukewarm, skeptical permission from LA Parks and Rec, but they gave us permission to do the project. Yay, Marcos is here. But they gave us permission to do the project, and we basically kind of canvassed. It's an open source like grassroots effort in that it's largely funded by Terremoto and Saturate LA and Citizens Committee to Save Elysian Park, and we're trying to figure out the minimum kind of material, botanic, human like inputs that we can use to rehabilitate this land that has been devastated through people treating the land terribly. So it's an effort in like ecological rejuvenation is kind of the way we're kind of framing it. And in doing the project, we've realized that there's this huge population of people who live nearby who want to help. And so a lot of those people do live in apartments and things like that. And so I planted plants one day with this lovely woman who basically was saying like, I just want to garden and I can't garden at my home. So in a very idiosyncratic, unique way, Test Plot, I think, is able to connect that desire and impulse that people have and like put it to good use. So yeah, that's one thing that we're involved in specifically.
Yeah, and I think that is an interesting model that all these people want to help, they want to get engaged. So if we're talking about growing food, rewilding, taking over spaces, the people are there, they're primed and they're ready to go. And I think that is actually probably not a stumbling point. It's more just the organization and the direction to do that. I see that our fourth panelist is finally here. Marcos Trinidad, welcome. Marcos, we've just kind of started talking. Marcos is the center director at the Audubon Center at Debs Park. He is a leader in the conservation community, changing the way that we do conservation and think about diversity in this field and how we represent ourselves. So we're honored to have him this evening. And Marcos, I'll just ask you to put your kind of vision for Los Angeles moving, say, 50 years in the future. Where do you see us heading? And we'll weave this into our conversation where we have three kind of main points: is awareness and knowledge, love, and a decentralization and personal responsibility towards taking part in this project. So where do you see the landscape going in the next 50 years?
Hi everyone. Yeah, sorry I'm a bit late. I'd like to come up with a great excuse, but I was literally playing with goats and now I'm here. So we were talking about using goats for restoration, right? So all of that, Aaron, sorry, Evan. I think when I look at a vision or just what is possible, what we can do with everything that we've learned recently, and tapping into a lot of the historical knowledge that's out there. I look at being able to look at our our landscape currently in it for me, say a place like Northeast Los Angeles or in an urban area, and being able to incorporate a lot of the native plant practices that we currently practice and that we know of, but also finding a balance to where this cultural love for plants and food and all these great resources that we have, and finding a balance where we can have both. Specifically for us at Debs Park, we focus on native plants. It's amazing, not just California native plants, but very regional in how we look at where we collect seed, what we're putting in into the space. I feel with being so close to the city and people that are able to come in on a regular basis, it is a really great opportunity for us to see how native plants life cycle is, on a continuous basis, but also how we can incorporate that into our daily lives, where it may not be something that is a traditional, mindset of what folks were experiencing as a child, or even what was passed on through generations. So as I look at a future for Los Angeles is a lot more of that, a lot more of understanding how our urban forestry works within our open spaces in an urban environment, and also the impact that it has with wildlife and the ecology of local ecosystems. So for me, it's a lot more understanding and taking a holistic approach to both of these things.
Understanding and a holistic approach, and incorporating viewpoints that are maybe outside of the viewpoint that we kind of like to talk about. So I think we're starting to weave towards a vision, and I want to hone in on kind of your individual areas of expertise and interest in some of the conversations we've all had in the past. And this can stimulate back and forth conversation, so feel free to chime in, panelists, if you see something interesting or hear something interesting. I want to start with you, Naomi, because you and I have worked together in plant conservation over the years. And this is something that's so important. We're in a biodiversity extinction crisis. And so there are people fighting to literally keep plants from going extinct right now. And that's the work that Naomi does. This is something that happens typically at an institutional scale. So it's maybe difficult for an individual kind of enthusiast to get involved with that. And I wonder, if we want to truly save plant diversity, what can the individual do, and what structures might we envision in the future that can help mitigate extinction and loss of biodiversity at the individual level?
Yeah, certainly. I work, I feel like I have a great privilege to work on a daily basis in service of plants. That's what I see my life to be, is to work to support plant diversity, to give them a voice. And I know not everyone, is able to be able to do that on a daily basis for their work. But I do think that I can't do my work without the support of the general public. And so we need people voting in elected officials that support policies that enable plant conservation. That's where we can support strong climate policy to be a strong climate voter. The funding doesn't come through, the policies aren't strengthened or carried out in an effective manner if we don't hold our elected officials accountable and let them know how critical, how important the environment is to us. So in that way, everybody is involved in plant conservation. If you're an advocate for plants and you're advocating for them at the ballot box, you're doing probably the best thing you can do for plant diversity, because in California, we are very fortunate. We have very strong policies supporting plant conservation, climate action, and we're a leader in this respect. And this isn't necessarily, the case in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, where maybe political action, being able to have your voice heard through elected officials, we can empower ourselves in that way. And then also just in the organizations that you support, the supporting organizations like the European Foundation, California Botanic Garden, California Native Plant Society, all these organizations are able to do work and the great work that they do through that funding. So I think everyone, we're all here today and supporting plants. And so we're all doing something really positive for plant conservation today by supporting Theodore Payne Foundation and just having this general conversation. So we are all involved, whether or not you do it on a daily basis. And then just, I think when I started my, my personal native plant garden, I don't think I understood that I was essentially building like a mini ecosystem. And just imagine that propagated throughout Los Angeles, like, millions of times, and how many lizards and native bees and butterflies I'm supporting by putting native plants out. And that's just something very tangible you can do. And by doing that, you're saving water, and we're not, we can limit, hopefully in the future, we can reduce the amount of water we export from other locations, and we stop dewatering ecosystems. And that's another way to support biodiversity, is just directly through that water conservation, because where does that water come from? That water supports diversity elsewhere, whether it's supporting fish or plants. So there's a lot we can do in, every day.
I mean, there's no other solution where on both sides you're mitigating the biodiversity crisis. Using less water in landscape in Southern California enhances Southern California biodiversity and leaves water in the Owens Valley or the Colorado River for the biodiversity there. So that's one of the best things you can do to support biodiversity, is use less water.
Yeah.
I also will just say that we will see beautiful representations of these landscapes that Naomi was just describing throughout the next 2 days. And I wanted to bring up one, which is the Garden of DJ Peterson in Filipino Town, which we'll see on Sunday. He grows the Franciscan manzanita, the pink flowering sumac, and other plants that are pretty rare. So in addition to being kind of ecological refuges, there can be this other thing about saving rare species and just kind of keeping them going. The Franciscan manzanita, nearly extinct in the wild. So you'll get to see and talk about that with DJ tomorrow. So there is an informal ad hoc way of growing kind of rare plants as a garden practice, and it'd be nice to see structure built into that so people can participate in that in a way that really helps kind of sustain some of these plants that will potentially go extinct without human interventions. So there's a lot there. I'm going to keep moving here, and I want to move on to Sophie, because Sophie, there's so much of this is cultural, and we are kind of having a cultural moment with plants right now, which is super exciting for me as someone who's been involved with this, to see them becoming cool, if you will, and to see people on Instagram sharing their houseplants and talking about their gardens. And that is very heartening. And I wanted to kind of bring that to you. You are the youngest person on the panel, so you get to answer this question, but you also have a great voice and a great social media presence. And so I wanted to kind of wrap up this biodiversity movement and maybe compare it to the climate movement and youth activism in climate, and then kind of end that with, how can conservationists and people who are really working to conserve the environment attach meaning and depth to these trends that are happening right now?
I like that you're looking to me for what's cool. Yeah, no, that's something I've been thinking about a lot, especially since you sort of brought up this question to me. I think that my generation, and especially the generation that's growing up now, was very tech was very forced onto us at an early age. And when my mom talks about growing up in LA, she talks about like growing up in the valley and looking for, like fossils. And there was a stream in Encino, like by her house, and it wasn't so urbanized. Everything wasn't so urbanized. And I think so much of my generation is spending endless hours on a screen, and it's depressing, and it's really depressing. And I think especially during COVID, when one of the only things we could do was go outside, take a walk, and be outdoors alone, people sort of had this new appreciation for nature. And especially, I mean, every person in our industry this year, even Theodore Payne, was just like, we had amazing years despite what was going on, because people, first of all, they were lacking in their lives, I think. And there's so many, memes on the internet about being depressed and buying more plants, and like photos of people my age with a house full of plants because that's all they have to make them happy, which is sad, but it's true. In terms of something that people were bringing up in the chat about how people don't have space to garden, that's sort of where it's hard to sort of connect the house plant and like trendiness of plants to biodiversity or the climate crisis, because even I don't have a yard. I don't have an opportunity to plant natives really where I live. And I think less and less people have that opportunity or are able to buy homes. And so, people my age are stuck in apartments. And yeah, I'm finding that a lot of people are beginning to try and enter the field of native plants, which is awesome. There are all these people sort of popping up on my Instagram saying that they're doing like regenerative land work, or they're getting interested in natives or plants. And it's great. It's awesome. The more people that are into plants, the better. And I think it's up to us, and especially events like this, to see how we translate that into more effective, I guess, like policies. And in regards to the youth climate movement, I really hope that that doesn't lose momentum because of COVID. But I think anything in the realm of nature and getting people into nature is not going to hurt. It's only going to help. So that's sort of where I see younger generations going.
Yeah, I see a trend towards people being interested in botany, interested in nature in ways that they haven't before. I think it's really exciting, and I think that we do need to be open to and cognizant of ways to capture that momentum and catch the wave, so to speak, so that it actually affects real impactful change. And we started out this conversation with saying that we really need to change big stuff. David, that was kind of one of your points, was that our systems of the past have failed us. So we need new systems. So there's a lot of work to do to get to what we're talking about. And a lot of that, again, I'm going to stay in this kind of cultural trend space, because David, I think Terremoto has done amazing work in making a more ecological approach and more place-based approach cool and trendy. And I'll attach that to plant material as well, that you guys have done a great job of telling the story of ecology and nature in a way that is new and different and brings new people in. So I wonder if you can talk about that trend in landscape architecture and in horticulture, and kind of what you've seen happening and where you think it's going, and what else we can do to continue to push it in a better place.
Sure. I concur with everything that you said, Sophie. So I'm kind of elongating on it in that interior plants are cool right now. That's a good impulse. But then how do we, as like kind of the more environmental, ecologically focused community, like take that thing, that good like rhizomatic like trend that's happening everywhere, and kind of like reposition it? And the way we reposition it at plant material is in a strange way, we're not particularly motivated to sell interior plants, but we do. But what we do is oftentimes people will come in to buy an interior plant, and then we guide them and show them and make them smell black sage. And it's just like, so often it's just like a revelation. So in a weird way, I think it's important for native plant advocates to, rather than tell people the way they're doing their garden is wrong, I feel like that's less of a way of like winning people over to like our movement. It's better to, again, to get back to be the guy that keeps talking about love, but win them over with love, and like win them over by just showing them the thing that's better and being like, that's great. Oh, you're interested in gardening. let me show you like Clarkia, and let me show you white sage, and then you kind of, and then there's a way of taking that impulse that these people might have and then orienting it towards something more ecologically meaningful. Yeah, and I guess, and to your points of like the large projects and these bigger things, in our pregame, I kind of like touched on this, but I have like this, Terremoto has this small subtext of a theory in which we're kind of like disbelievers in like these large, huge infrastructural big projects. And I think redoing the LA River and all that is good and important. And I'm not trying to naysay those projects because they have a role in our city, but also there's vacant land everywhere, and there's a million ways people can start interacting with the land near them in like small kind of surgical ways. So these kind of bigger, more government heavy projects that take forever, and sometimes I feel like never are going to happen. While we're waiting for that to happen, I feel like maybe we as a community need to figure out a million different ways of kind of changing our city. And it kind of just means like getting involved and getting ready to sweat with strangers and neighbors and things like that, whether it's the community garden down the street or it's, you know, some sort of pilot project you want to take on. So I kind of answered your question and then I kind of drifted, but anyways, yeah.
Drifting is encouraged here. It's
okay, sure.
So I think that idea of small projects and grassroots, it's already happening, right? Like people are here because they are doing that. They've chosen whatever space they have to participate in that. We need to get more people to participate in that because, you know, think that kind of upwelling of the tide will then probably trigger those larger municipal projects to happen. But I tend to agree with you. I like to just roll up my sleeves and jump into things without knowing how it's going to come out often. Yeah. I think that's okay.
And I think we can maybe like champion modesty or champion like the beauty of the modest, accessible, doable residential garden. And that's how it starts maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I have one more kind of big question, then we still have another 20, 25 minutes to continue this conversation and hear from the audience. But I want to go to Marcos because I think we're talking from a very particular perspective. I think we've already started to dance around that we're talking from a perspective of privilege here. You know, we're talking about people who have space, and even if they don't have space, they can you know, devote time to thinking about ecology and nature. You've done a lot of work to try to get this community out of that echo chamber because that represents a pretty, you know, not the whole picture, a small part of the pie, and we want the whole picture here. So what do you think can help us change our vision and our way of communicating to get out of that echo chamber so that it's resonating in a much deeper and more meaningful way across our whole society and our whole city?
Yeah. Yeah, I also agree with everything that has been said. I think, Sophie, I like, you know, plants and birds have always been cool. I think social media just helped get the word out. So at least that's what I tell myself, to still think that I might be somewhat cool. I think when you really think about what it is we do and why we do it and how we got to this point, I don't know if any of us can really say, hey, well, someone really told me this is the only way to do it, and I was really receptive to that, and now I'm doing it that way. I feel when I think about my process and into getting into native plants, and now thinking, like, aside from food, like growing vegetables and fruits, I have not planted anything but natives for over like 17, 18 years. And what got me into this, I'm going to share with y'all, and I know there's a lot of folks on here, please don't hold it against me. Eucalyptus trees got me into really wanting to be into plants and into trees. And I didn't really know anything about eucalyptus. I just loved the way it smelled, and I loved the texture of some of the bark on these trees, and it was just something that attracted me to this tree. And it wasn't until much later that I was taught to hate eucalyptus, and why it was so bad, and why I should, really start only planting these other trees. I end up coming up, to a point. I don't hate eucalyptus. I wouldn't plant it. I don't remove them just because they're eucalyptus. I remove them for other reasons. But it helped me with my process of being able to share native plants and what I do with other people, in the sense that I'm not really pushing anything down their throat or trying to convince them of something. What I feel we've been able to really do is provide a space that folks can come out to and experience in a very natural way. And the native plants are going to do their job. They're going to win folks over. And if I were to try to convince people into like, I'd probably mess it up for them more than I'd help them. But it's this idea that we're able to provide this connection and some of the reasons and the information behind it. And I feel culturally, when we think about a lot of the connection we have, or childhood memories, like I remember going to a park and being in the grass, and now the park that I manage really doesn't have any grass. So there's those experiences that I'm not able to facilitate in the same way. So I'm now working in very different ways on how to facilitate a different experience. So I think it's important for us, as we continue to share how passionate we are about native plants, and how we already know that that's the way, that everyone's on their own journey. And I always say, like, if it's a house plant, a succulent, whatever it is, that's like the gateway drug into environmentalism or advocacy, because everything that Naomi was talking about in terms of being involved, like, you're going to get to that point. Normally you don't start at that point, but eventually it's like, oh yeah, I got this house plant, from a friend as a gift. And it gets into learning a little bit more about it. And then soon you're going to be at the climate march, and you're going to be volunteering, all over the place. And next thing, you're going to be at the party showing pictures of plants and going on hikes, and you're going to be that person that folks send photos of flowers to, so you can identify what it is. So I think it's just really about respecting where people are in their journey, and letting them really figure it out on why they love natives. But what we can do is just facilitate that process and be there when they're ready, because then they're gonna be like, oh, hey, you know what? I think, Marcos put a native plant garden at his mom's house. And I did a long time ago. And the first thing my mom said when she walked out, I'm all sweaty. It was like a 7-hour process. And I put all these plants in. She's like, what are all these weeds? Like, no, thank you. No, like, hey, here's a glass of lemonade. It was like, what are all these weeds? And now she's at a point where she's really invested in that garden, because she sees the cycle and she knows which plants to pull out and which plants to leave. And it was just, providing that option of seeing what the differences are.
Thank you, Marcos. There's so much in there that I want to talk about, but I think the thing that I want to talk about briefly and have everybody kind of weigh in, because it really touches on this whole conversation and things that Sophie mentioned and David and Naomi, is this generational shift. Is like, it's hard to ask someone to do something differently when their whole identity is kind of wrapped around it. So it's like, I grew up playing with my kid in the backyard, and in the front yard, my dog plays catch. So there's a challenge there. So how do you create new memories and you've kind of just touched on this, but I wonder if the other panelists have any feedback on those new moments and those points of interaction and connection that will spark a new generational shift and a new point of view. And this comes back to actually how Naomi started with, she didn't necessarily get those growing up, and luckily she found her way here. But what do we need to do to make sure that this coming generation, and I'll put my daughter in that, she's 4, and how do we make sure that all of them have that as a viewpoint, that native plants and nature is really awesome and we want to be part of it, and then that kind of perpetuates down the line. And also I'll add one thing, that can happen in the urban environment. It doesn't have to happen outside of the urban environment. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
I have a couple of thoughts, because I think a lot about my childhood and why native plants seemed absent from that. Like I'm a plant person. I'm as planty as you can get, but I didn't know that native plants existed. Like the concept that there are plants indigenous to a place that are adapted to the climate that don't require supplemental watering, like was a totally foreign concept to me until I was an undergraduate in college studying biology. Like that's a crime. Like that should not be the case, right? And so I saw people in the chat were mentioning school gardens, and that's, I think, a really important way is integrating native plants into school gardens, and getting kids like planting, touching plants. I think if I had plants, native plants in a park landscape with some signage and some information, that I'll be like, oh, California sagebrush. What is California sagebrush? Oh, it smells so nice. Just to even know what they were. To me, I had heard the word, I think, chaparral in high school. And to me, it was this, it was something of like the brown things on the hillside. Like I didn't understand the concept. Like I didn't know what that meant. And so I think education from a young age in the school system, whether or not your parents might not have the resources to be able to take you to museums. At the garden where I work, we have a school program taking Title I schools to the garden. And that to me is like really critical, really important to get the students there, get them on a bus, pay for the bus, get them to, the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles, get them to California Botanic Garden, get them to any botanic garden, throughout the region. And I have met so many people who have interviewed with jobs for me who said, I came to this garden as a kid, and that's when I first learned about native plants, and now I want to be a botanist. And it's like, it's a whole gateway when you're a kid to, I went to the LA Zoo, I was into animals, but I didn't go to, if I went to a botanic garden, I might've found it earlier, but it took me a while.
I'll add to the vision, the world needs more botanic gardens.
Yeah, one thing I even throw in there, because that, like, yeah, definitely one piece that I see that we can support as a city. I'm gonna throw a plug out there for Rio de Los Angeles. It's in Cypress Park, Glassell Park. In my opinion, it's one of the best parks and should be the demonstration of what parks can really be when you're taking all of these things into consideration, because it's combining active recreation. You could, my daughter was playing tennis there. You have football, soccer, all these things that the community really wants. And then you have this wetland that is exposing this group of folks that would normally not ever go to a wetlands. And then they also have a parking lot that is filled with native trees, native plants, and there's that exposure. So one missed opportunity that was there is maybe having signage for all of these things, but it's there, so there's this exposure. So I think having more of that, incorporating this space in there and teaching our youth how to interact with the space, because we just put some native plants around the Veterans Memorial in a way to keep children running and jumping off of the rock that the plaque is on. So it's also like, all right, now how are we using native plants? Are we trying to direct them to have a certain behavior? Are kids going to be able to, roll around in the same way? So there's a lot there.
it seems that garden education for children sort of starts, at pre-K and ends at pre-K. There is, I did briefly work for Enrich LA, which is a nonprofit, and they're trying to put, a garden in every school. That's their motto. But after, kindergarten, there's not really a viable path forward for people interested in plants. So even children that are interested in gardening, the curriculum sort of shifts away from that. And there, I was never taught about like botany as a job, landscaping as a job, horticulture as a job. Like there is no, no one's really encouraging their kids to grow up and become farmers. And I think that sort of talks to what I was saying earlier about, it's not only a cultural shift, especially when you talk about pulling up your lawn. Like to me, the most hesitancy I find when I'm working with clients, the lawn is a cultural, it's a cultural attachment. And a lot of times I go to people's homes and they have huge lawns. And I say, do you have kids? And they say no. And I say, do you have dogs? And they say no. And I say, well, do you ever sit out here? And they say no. And it's a cultural shift. And that's the same with school gardens. We need to be, as a society, valuing the people that grow our food and the value and the added value of having nature in our cities. And so definitely, I totally agree with what Naomi was saying, what everyone else was saying about introducing kids to these things early on. And then more than that, but giving them like a path forward to encourage those interests.
I know for me, I had my preschool Dixie cup sunflower that was like the coolest thing ever. But it is true that was kind of the end of it. So I think part of this vision is horticulture, caring for the land, understanding, being able to read it should be seen as an essential skill because it literally is the environment that we live in. And I know for many years it was kind of like a weird backwater that us nerdy plant people were in, but I'm hopeful that we will get to a place where we can encourage and realize how essential that knowledge is and how it'll probably be more essential as we continue down this road of environmental destruction that we're on, because we really are in a point where we need to rebuild. So I hope that this next generation churns out exponentially more plant experts and restoration ecologists and horticultural experts than our generation. I want to get to a question that's getting a lot of chatter in the chat, and we'll start to move to Q&A here. But we're talking, David, you brought up the idea of kind of not sitting and waiting for the government to do some massive restoration, well-funded project. And people are asking, well, there are all these vacant lots and random places. And this is not an official Theodore Payne Foundation position. This is the position of all the panelists here. But what do you guys feel about guerrilla gardening?
I think it's good. It was an interesting point. So when we actually went to the Department of Parks and Rec and asked for their permission to do our test plot project, the main qualifier on which they were kind of hesitant to give us permission was the fact that they didn't want the greater public to think that anybody could just start going into public parks and start gardening. And I think that's fair. And I actually appreciated that like hesitancy, because part of their job is to protect the public parks. And though it's easy to say like, oh, but what we're doing at test plot is like good, you get into a vague area where people start just like building gardens in public land. There's that interesting park in Griffith Park that I forget the name of it. That a guy like
Amir's Garden.
Amir's Garden, thank you. That kind of built. And it's fascinating, but it's not like an ecologically oriented garden. So that's kind of a ramble of a preamble, but I think it's good. And I think anything that you can do to get people connecting to their nearby land, especially if it's underused and not like being utilized in any meaningful way, then that can be generally like a positive thing. I read a book many years ago that kind of inspired me to go to grad school, and it was called City Form and Natural Process. And it's by Michael Huff, this Canadian biologist. And he basically, over many years, did this wildlife survey of Toronto. And he basically came to the conclusion that in large part, all meaningful wildlife goings on and interactions were happening in vacant land, like the interstitial spaces throughout the city. Those sorts of meaningful wildlife interactions weren't happening in like manicured lawns and things like that. And it was like this revelation for me where it was like, it was just like something I had never thought about it. And it had like this really meaningful impact on me. So to that end, be careful, but go for it. I mean, it's kind of like, I feel like our government isn't doing these things. So as long as we're like, I think being thoughtful and careful and doing, planting the right types of things, we should.
I think there was a period where I was like guerrilla everything, and it kind of, you know, at times would get me in trouble, but I think for the most part, it was a really good learning process. Now that I manage a space, and anytime there's any guerrilla anything, I'm just like, what is this? And I'm constantly like pulling things out that people are planting, and it's just a very different connection. And especially now, as I look at these the vacant lots, and thinking like, wow, these can be so many native plant corridors. And I'm thinking more like, you know, how birds migrate through an urban environment. But then I also think about even the fact that I'm thinking about, wow, we should use these vacant lots for plants. It's coming from a level of privilege where it's just like, wow, those vacant lots should be used for homes. So we also have to understand like, hey, what are we competing with? Because we learned a lot from the South Central farmers when that space was used for people to grow food, and how now a lot of owners of land do not want to let people grow on that land because they don't want another a situation like that to happen, which is awful. So I think if you can do it responsibly, it's the same thing with gathering or seed collecting. Folks are constant, like I'm constantly, you know, shaking my finger at people, you know, as they're harvesting my white sage. I say my white sage because I plant, like, leave it there.
We get the question of seed bombs all the time at Theodore Payne, and Jenny Arnold, our seed program manager, is always, it's like, do we, you know, it's well-meaning, but what are the seeds? What are you doing with them? And Naomi, you're a botanist. I wonder if you could comment a little bit on just kind of randomly throwing out seeds into, you know, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think there's such a sliding scale there, because people who have that same maybe impetus to guerrilla garden in the urban landscape might also then have the urge to repopulate areas that were recently burned that are natural, that will naturally regenerate on their own with seed bombs. So that was something I heard after the Thomas fire, which was in Ventura County at the time, was the largest recorded fire in Southern California. I believe that was what it was called. And I was getting emails from people asking for advice how to convey information to the general public who wanted to go out and put, you know, seed the hillsides to recover the area, and to explain to them that there's a natural seed bank there that will, you know, when the rains come and the plants will resprout, and there's just no need to introduce non-local source plants to the wild landscape. And given that we are in this urban wildland urban interface all around Los Angeles, it's just, it has potential to kind of like lean into inappropriate management of wildlands, I would say. So yeah.
I'd agree with that. And I think like one of our challenges as a community, and this is something that we could envision together as well, is this is complicated, nuanced stuff. Like we're focusing mostly on the social, political aspects of it, which is really complicated, but the biology is really complicated too. So you're trying to kind of bridge these two disparate systems that are both incredibly nuanced and complicated, and sharing that information with people that's digestible and easily accessible, so they can meaningfully participate in it without either being overwhelmed or just doing the wrong thing because they don't know any better, is a big challenge that we face. And Sophie, one of the things that I really love that you did was your turf versus natives guide. And we had a question about turf. Someone was on their soapbox about turf, which I often get on as well.
I could talk about turf all day.
Why do people like turf? I don't know, but they do. So maybe
I think a lot of people. Sorry, what's your question?
I was just gonna ask you, like, through that project and the way that you kind of boiled that down, can you just talk about how we might simplify our complicated message into something more digestible and easy to connect with?
The complicated message about
kind of what we were just talking about of you know, what is the right thing to do? Do we throw seeds out or not? You know, because people don't know.
I think most people who put in turf think that they're saving water. I would hope that people generally want to do the right thing. And I think the turf industry or turf companies are telling people that this is a good alternative because of the drought, which is really just our climate now. And yeah, that messaging is so important. And I think Marcos was talking about Audubon, like bird migration patterns. And I'm always thinking sort of about like pollinator superhighways, things like that. I'm not sure exactly what you want me to touch on, but I do think that people put in turf with the thought that they're saving water when actually turf, and I guess in a sense is saving water, but it's also not harvesting any water, which is what like healthy soils and plants do. So yeah, I did a deep dive on turf, and I hate turf.
Turf sucks.
With a strong passion, yes.
I also think a lot of it goes in with behavior and tradition. Like if you're so used to seeing a lawn, and it has a lot to do with maintenance.
Yeah.
And folks look at this process as it being a tool in their toolbox. Instead of having to mow lawn, they just put this turf that looks green. They don't have to really maintain it. And they're really not concerned about any of the ecological benefits of any of it, right? So again, it comes into this behavior. Like when I think about climate change and all of that, how it should just be behavior change, we're still having to deal with behavior. And I had these conversations with a lot of folks. I'm like, look, you could do all this really cool stuff, but at the end of the day, they don't want to have to maintain anything or pay for anything outside of this one investment, saying, here, there it goes, and I'm done. So it's interesting on how we communicate that, because we're now going into behavior, and it's like an adult telling another adult how they should behave.
And can I jump in also? I feel like these are all incredible points. And a lot of these things, I think, speak to the fact that people are confused in that from the 1950s to the present, everybody largely, if you had a home, you would put grass on it, and then like foundation shrubbery and maybe a tree. And that's how you landscaped. I think people are acknowledging, or they've heard enough buzz that they know that that's no longer appropriate. So there was that, and now what's happening is, but people don't necessarily know what's next, because the moment you erase that thing that's inappropriate, it's almost like overwhelming in that there's this infinity of like possible things that you could do. And I think like people putting fake turf, sometimes they're like, oh, it's better for the environment, when it's actually worse for the environment. And then there was that moment where there was that rebate where everybody was ripping out their lawn, and then there was that company throwing gravel everywhere and putting, and it was like people wanted to do better, but then whatever, this predatory company was like doing, like, it was like coming
Where'd
from a
the
good
gravel
place.
come from?
Yeah, no, exactly. And then putting down that filter fabric, which is just like an entire industry that should just be outlawed. Anyways, I digress. But I think all these things, this confusion is that kind of speaks to the fact that people want to change their landscapes, but they don't know how. So I guess all I would offer to the 153 people on this call and the people on the panel is that like we should just be like good thought leaders and stewards at levels like neighbor, individual, but also community. Like anytime a person like needs help, then like kind of help them and be like, oh, you want to rip your lawn out, or then this is a thing that you can do, and just being like showing them through kindness, I think is one thing that we can do.
I want
Being generous.
I want to also respond to what Marcos said about people putting in turf because it's sort of like an investment into not having to maintain their gardens or their property or their landscape. And that's so true. And it's such a privilege to be able to like hire someone to come maintain your garden once or twice a year or every week or whatever. But it also makes me think about the negative effects of turf, the added heat and the microplastic pollution, and also just the mental the mental effect of not having plants outside your window or on your property. And it's sort of like a double-edged sword in that the people who maybe can't afford to maintain their gardens end up getting the brunt of the worst effects of climate change. And the things that those that turf possibly ends up doing so, it's definitely something to think about, and it is upsetting. And I think sometimes people do say it is privileged to tell someone like you can't use turf even though it'll save you money, but in the long run, like, we're all going to suffer, and maybe the people who are saving money are going to suffer the worst from that. And so that is something I think about a lot, and I wish that there was more public infrastructure to help people, and more investment from our government to say, maybe we will help you take care of your native plants or your garden as a return for not putting in turf, which is going to, in the end, be detrimental to all of us.
Definitely. I do recommend everyone to check out Sophie's really cool infographic.
Thank
I think is
you.
on your Instagram handle.
Yeah, I'll post the link actually.
Yeah, post the link. The chat is amazing right now. There's so many like comments, and just I can't even get through it all. I wish we had another hour, honestly, with this panel, because you guys are so interesting, and it's amazing. But we have to move on soon. So I'm going to give you all just a minute to kind of summarize your thoughts, maybe give a couple of plugs for your social media handles and things like that. And I want to thank you all for being here. I think this vision is just a start. You know, we have a lot of work to do, but having these conversations is so important to getting there, and to understanding, where are the obstacles in our way? Where are the hurdles? Where do we need to be investing our time and our resources? And I think we're getting closer. So let's just keep the conversation going, and we'll go in the reverse order this time, starting with Marcos with a closing remarks for tonight.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for spending time really having these conversations. I think they're really important. I think it is awesome that this is something that people do on a Friday at 7 o'clock. It's something that is what helped me kind of get through this crazy year that we've had recently, in terms of looking at how I interacted with my garden and my outdoor space, and really looking at how fortunate I am to have a space like Debs Park. So again, I would really want to push that just meet people where they are, share your passion, and facilitate that connection, because I think that's going to be the key. And folks are going to be able to really figure out why natives are so cool and what is really amazing about them. We're hoping to open up Debs Park in June, so I invite everyone to check out what we've been working on. We just replaced all of our roofs and our solar panel system, so it's we're excited to see everyone. And yeah, I just want to thank the panelists and Theodore Payne for really putting this on.
Thanks, Marcos. So in reverse alphabetical order, it would be Sophie next.
My website is urbanfarmsla.com. My Instagram is urbanfarmsla. I think I made all my positions very clear, but I want to thank Evan and Scott and Katie and everyone who's put this weekend together. I always tell people this is my Coachella weekend. And I'm very sad that it's not in person. It's my favorite weekend of the year. So thanks for all of your work, and thanks for having me. This is very special, so thank you.
Thank you for being here. David, some parting words for us?
Sure. My shameless plugs are Plant Material. It's a lovely nursery and hard goods shop in Godshall Park. And in addition to lots and lots of native plants, we have edible plants and regionally appropriate plants. And yeah, so check it out. It's a cool shop, good music. And Terremoto Landscape is the name of the company. Terremoto.la is the website. And yeah, I'm tinkering with this idea of like the fact that like on our small garden projects, they want to be like these beautiful like visions of like our interconnectedness and like kind of empathy. And so I would just encourage you all to build your gardens with that in mind, because I think the future is bright. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, David. And we will end with the parting words from Naomi.
Thank you again, Evan, for inviting me, and Theodore Payne for hosting this event. And it's great to hear from everybody. I think a lot of what we talked about today really comes at the core of thinking about the way in which this city was built and perhaps decolonizing the landscape. I think in the future, we, I have a lot to learn more about plants. I feel like I've been a botanist for however many, over 2 decades, and I am constantly learning. It is a learning process. Like I thought I was going to become a botanist and I would have this set of knowledge and I would apply it like in the world. And what I've come to know is that I am just like, it's a journey. And I am wanting to know more about the historical landscape from which I grew up, and have that inspire me to think about what I want to see in the future. And I think these conversations really need to center Indigenous voices with that perspective. And so I think there's like some undoing to take place, perhaps, just in terms of the way we build structures up. So that's in terms of our education, our infrastructure. There's this discussion about turf, and I think of turf, like my dad, I think thought of that as like the American dream. We would have a house, like picket fence and turf and shrubbery or whatever. And I think that idea was part of this sort of like taming of the West and kind of controlling, and creating this very tame environment. And I think it's time to kind of deconstruct that and then just recognize that there is a natural world out there that we're a part of, and that it's not this sort of neat and tidy, like we're in the city, we're in human space, and you know, the animals live sort of in these wildlands. Like it needs to be more permeable. You know, there's urban coyotes. We have our mountain lions and birds, and it's like we are in nature. Like let's just make it more hospitable to our neighbors, our wildlife, and because we're all a community together. So.
Here, here. I think that's a wonderful sentiment to end on. We are in nature. The city is nature. It's not different from the mountains and the wilderness. We need to start thinking of them as the interconnected spaces that they are, and taking the responsibility of being in that space to make the right choices. Thank you guys so much for being here. So we're going to be seeing visionary landscapes the next 2 days, and a lot of the ideas that we've been discussing will continue to come to light. And I just really want to thank you all for being here. We're now going to shift gears. I'm going to do my own very shameless plug right now, which I have to take off my my visionary hat for a minute, put on my executive director hat, and say that we are actually doing some fundraising right now. So if you have a couple of extra bucks that you'd like to kick our way, tax-deductible donations, we have a bunch of really cool stuff from Patagonia, like this cool day pack and other stuff that any donation over $25 will be entered to win this Patagonia stuff. We have a lot of it. So there's a good chance if you can donate some money on our website, theodorepaine.org, you will get some cool Patagonia swag. And I want to thank Patagonia Pasadena for making that possible. And I want to thank this panel. So I did my due diligence. I know some of the board of directors is out there watching me, so I did everybody. Thank you guys for being here. We are now going to switch over to taste some local source native plant beer. Do any of our panelists have any of the beer with them? No? Okay. Well, thank you guys. We're going to switch off.
I think it got lost in the mail.
Do you have some, Marcos?
No, I said I think it got lost in the mail. It must have.
Hit me up, Marcos. I'll send you some.
Once. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's just the beers, but like you're looking a little fuzzy right now.
I know. I'm trying to figure out what happened to that. I haven't even had a sip yet, so. We have our tech team is coming in to hopefully. No, it's the camera.
Man, I wish I had a tech team to, when the beers make things fuzzy for me, I wish I had a tech team to.
Well, welcome, Jeremy. This is Jeremy Robb, owner of Eagle Rock Brewery, founder of Eagle Rock Brewery, and Flora Ito, who is our nursery manager. This is entering the happy hour portion of the evening. So sit back. We have some amazing music coming after this. And I'm getting a text from the musicians right now. But we're going to talk today about local source beer. If anyone has one that they can hold up, Flora, I'm going to go off camera for a second as we switch cameras. But Flora, can you describe the plants that go into this beer? And you're going to have to unmute yourself, Flora.
Ready?
Yep.
Oh, I think you're still muted, Flora.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here we go. Hi there.
Yay, we can hear you.
Great. Holding a can of our local source beer, and thanks to Eagle Rock Brewery, we were able to use a few of our native plants that are local to our area. So I just also want to switch over and show some of the plants. I hope they can catch this. So one of the plants in here is a Salvia mellifera, or black sage. I was just able to capture this one in bloom, and just a more closer up of the leaves. If you go hiking in the verdugos, actually for a lot of these, you'll find them in the verdugos and across. Sorry, I'm outside, got some sirens going on here. But this is a Salvia mellifera black sage. Works well in any type of soil. So, and it also gets about 3 to 4 feet tall and 4 to 5 feet wide. And then we have the Umbellularia californica, or the California bay leaf. And this is a huge tree. I'm just bringing you a small stem from our tree that we have on our site. But this is a beautiful leaf form, very aromatic. The California Bay, when you smell it and rub it, it also could use in cooking. It is a tree, so you want a big space for that, and it can get at least 40 to 50 feet tall, maybe about 40 to 50 feet wide too, if you let it grow that way. It's known to grow much faster along the coastal areas, but also does well inland. And then the one that is very beautiful right now is the Trichostum elantum, or the woolly blue curl. And one of the things that I always like to find out is a little bit of historical history. And one of the common names for the woolly blue curl is actually Romero. And if you take a look at the leaves, they kind of look like rosemary. So when the Spanish came in their expedition during the Portola expedition, this reminded them of rosemary. So it actually captured that name. Beautiful plant. Just a shout out to Debs Park as one of the most beautiful specimens that I saw was at Debs Park. I hope it's still there. Does well in any kind of soil. Actually fast draining soil, and can take on a lot of sun. It is something that you want to consider, and actually for the umbellularia to grow during our fall and winter season, and then you can get them properly established. But yeah, so there's a little intro on the plants there.
Okay, so there's the botanical source of this beer, and I want to cheers everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the garden tour. We have 3 days ahead of us. It's going to be such a blast. I'm going to take a sip right now and just, that's delicious. I hope some of you are trying that along with us at home. It's got a different flavor from the last batch, I think, Jeremy. We talked about this the other day. This one has got this very like almost tea. You can taste the black sage more, and they're both so good. But I love the story of how you kind of settled upon this beer itself. So I wonder if you could just quickly mention Eagle Rock Brewery and who you guys are, and then just talk about kind of the creation of this beer a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on this great discussion. By the way, everybody, cheers. I want to give a shout out to Flora just real quick first, because Flora was really the impetus behind this collaboration. Flora and her husband David have been coming to Eagle Rock Brewery since we opened up, and so last year was, as you all know, the 60th anniversary of Theater Pain, and Flora suggested to us and our team about maybe doing a beer together to help celebrate the anniversary. So that was how this idea came to us at Eagle Rock Brewery. And we of course embraced it. We love doing, projects that explore flavors in beer, and we also love working with local and native ingredients as much as possible. So this was totally right up our alley. This beer, in kind of thinking about everything that there was, we went and our team visited the TPF grounds, and it was sort of like going to it's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's like the whole TPF team was very welcoming and like, hey, look, there's all this stuff to work with. And it was sort of like, what do we do? Where can we go? What could we work with? And it was really, quite honestly, a bit mind-blowing, because it opened our minds up to a lot of new flavor and aroma experiences. One of the way that we get excited as brewers, we get excited about new flavors and new ideas for beers is just experiencing things around us. It might be a food that we taste, something that we smell. I've definitely been inspired to make beers just by hiking around my neighborhood or walking the dog around my neighborhood and smelling these aromas that I might not be sure what it is. And then I realize what it is and kind of get inspired. but that's, you know, as brewers, that's our creative process. We have these inputs, and then something that it might inspire us to create a beer to either emulate a flavor or aroma that we have in our mind, or to kind of capture an experience, a time and a place. So that's really what we set out to do with this beer, and kind of having really with our process, it was first deciding what to use. So we just kind of took this, you know, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, this breadth of options of plants in front of us, and what to do with all of this. We sort of narrowed it down just by flavors that would probably work well together, and that would stand up to the brewing process, and that would kind of be able to last through just not just the brewing process, but through the fermentation and through, you know, the basically the inexorable aging of this beer as it sits on a shelf somewhere and before somebody drinks it. So so through that decision-making process, we kind of decided on black sage and the bay laurel. And I have to say that the woolly blue curls just stole our hearts and our minds. I mean, it was such, I was not familiar with that plant, and nobody else on our team was. And so it just, the way that the aromas of that plant, and the way it's so strikingly beautiful. I mean, it really is kind of amazing the way that it looks. It looks sort of, you know, at once alien and just classically beautiful. It's great.
The smell of that is like candy. It's like I always say it smells like blue raspberry or blue Gatorade. It's got this like crazy artificial smell that's like reminiscent of like childhood candy. And it's such a cool plant. And everyone should grab one of those for sure.
Totally. And I you know, like since we are introduced to it, since I've been introduced to it, I'm noticing like shampoos and things. I'm like, oh, I bet they used woolly blue curl in this. Like, I'm noticing more of that type of aroma and flavor now that I've been exposed to it. So that really did it. It really captured our imaginations, and we thought, what is the best way we could kind of you know, like in a way, like make this aroma last longer? How can you kind of immortalize a floral smell that's so short-lived, ephemeral, and it's a beautiful thing that just disappears, right? And so just thinking of what we could do, how we can incorporate this, and also the base beer that we could sort of build these flavors and aromas on. So so, you know, to us, we thought also we want this to be a very drinkable, refreshing beer that you want to go back for again and again. And so kind of using those parameters, it was like, okay, a lager tends to be like a universal style. A light lager tends to be a universal style. At once it dominated the world in terms of the beer market. So we knew that a light lager would have a wide range of flavor acceptability, but also it would offer us a good base to build upon. Helles lager is a touch sweeter than like a Pilsner would be. So it would give us a little bit of padding in terms of what these flavors and what these plants might do to the beer. So yeah, that was how we decided on the beer.
Came out so good. And
label is also amazing. I just wanted to really, you guys did such a great job capturing this.
Thank you. Yes. Hats off to the illustrator that produced this label, Andrew Bukowski. He was actually a graduate of Art Center, and was one of our one of our first original few employees. And now he lives in Florida with his family and works for a brewery down there. But he did this label for us last year from Florida because we knew his skills in illustration are just top notch. And I have to say, I love that, you know, me and my team, we're all nerds, totally nerds about beer and beer style and beer flavors. And it was so great when I sent the original draft of this label art to Evan and Flora and the team at TPF, and they were like, well, we have some notes because you know the plants don't quite look accurate. And I was like, yes, you know, these guys are so nerdy about plants, just as the way we are nerdy about beers. And I was like, this is awesome because I love that, you know, I might get a little upset if somebody was like, oh, this is a Helles lager. And I'm like, is it really? Like, it's a little more Pilsner for me. But, you know, you're like chopping the lines really fine. But I think it was so great, you know, that you guys came back with notes, and it was like, totally, we're gonna address these notes. We want you guys to be as happy with this as we want to be happy with it. So yeah.
Well, we are happy with it. I hope all you watching have a glass, and cheers. Jeremy, thanks so much for coming on tonight, and pick this up. It's at Eagle Rock Brewery. I think you said it's going to be available at some other locations, Whole Foods potentially, and
yeah, usually Whole Foods, Bristol Farms, kind of like the more major grocery store outlets that do carry it, carry our beers, I should say. Also, like a lot of the small mom and pop liquor stores, you guys know the better bottle shops that are out there. Those are, you know, your usual spots to pick up good stuff. That's definitely where you can find it.
It's delicious. It was really fun, and I hope we can do lots of other cool beers in the future. And maybe
you guys are open too, right?
I was going to say,
yeah.
right, the Eagle Rock is just like over my grove of avocados back here in Godshall Park, and it's a wonderful place to visit.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we are open for, you know, outdoor seating, and so I left there earlier tonight after getting the parking lot all set up, and yes, we're going to be working there all weekend. We'll be open and have food vendors as well as beer service. So it's actually great. We're going to actually, I'll do a little plug if I could for us for this weekend. We're launching a series of events to help support Stop Appy Hate. You know, a lot of the violence and hate that's been going on recently against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And my wife, being an Asian American, you know, we felt very strongly to help support this cause to stop this violence and hate, and, you know, just be able to, hey, like, change people's minds about what they might be thinking. So we're launching a series of events starting this Sunday, featuring Asian American and Pacific Islander chefs, cooks, people that are going to be doing pop-ups to offer, you know, their native hometown regional fare, and we're going to be pairing up with beers, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So come and visit, and then pick up some local source as well.
Awesome.
Many thanks, Jeremy. Cheers. Go to Eagle Rock Brewery and pick this up. So we're going to transition to the last event of the evening. This is the opening party of a weekend-long celebration. We're going to be seeing some amazing gardens, meeting some amazing people over the next few days. But I wanted to end with some music, because that's, you know, what's a good party without good music? And if you've watched any of the videos we produced, the little promo videos, you'll hear the beautiful song that is now kind of burned into my mind because I've heard it a million times, but I love it. It's amazing. And it's made by an old friend of mine who I'll introduce in a minute. But we thought, you know, it would be fun to do a live music set as an opening night party tonight. So I hope you've all had a couple sips of beer and are feeling relaxed and can sit back and hear some really cool music. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the album Plantasia, but if you haven't heard it, check it out. It is synth music written to be played to houseplants. And it's kind of a seminal album. Erin's shaking her head. Thumbs up. It's very interesting and wonderful music. And there's an organic kind of beautiful quality to it. And I think we're going to hear more of that tonight. So sit back, stay tuned. We have two amazing artists here who are going to just take us away this evening and get us ready for tomorrow. So I may come back on later or I may not. And if I don't come back on, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. bright and early to tour some amazing gardens. But we have two folks here, Tito Tunes and Body Switch. So this is Daniel Riera, aka Tito Tunes. He's a musician and permaculturalist gardener from San Francisco who uses electronic wind instruments, DIY analog synths, and live looping to create his organic sound, which is very biological, and it kind of almost makes you think of the plants and the organisms that we're cultivating in this environment, natural urban environment. His music is rooted in jazz improvisation and the West Coast traditions of experimental music and psychedelia. And then we have Paul Igaz, who is a media artist and educator based in the Bay Area. His work includes narrative film, experimental video, and music production. His experimental video work combines found footage, analog video synthesis to create sound reactive visual textures. So you'll be hearing some amazing music with footage inspired by the garden tour over the next 2 days, live reacted. Thank you for being here. Enjoy, and we'll see you tomorrow. So I'm going to pass it over to Daniel, Tito Tunes, and Body Switch.
How's everybody doing tonight? Can you hear me? You got audio? Check, check, check. Can you hear me now? All right, welcome. So excited to perform for you guys tonight. Feels like we're right in the living room with you. So I'm gonna start out with some gentle vibes inspired by the plants. Here we go. everybody, oh, come on everybody, come on 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 everybody, oh, come on everybody, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys had a good time. Thank you for being out there doing the work, being plant warriors, warriors for the earth. We need you. The earth needs you. We're all here together on Team Life.
Two Tunes
So
body
thank you.
switch. So beautiful. Sound warriors. That was amazing, guys. Thank you so much. Oh my God, I'm so inspired right now.
Thanks to everybody who stuck through to the end. We hope you enjoyed yourselves and join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. for Mid-City, Chinatown, and our Designing for the Environment roundtable discussion. Sorry, Evan, I stole the show from you.
Well, we had that visionary panel discussion and we talked about love. That was one of the things. Love is so important. And that's one of the things that we need to change our environment and to move to a better place as a species so that we can exist with other species as part of nature. Tito Tunes, at Body Switch. Check these guys out. That was such a cool, amazing performance. I'm so excited. We're going to have them come down and play something in person soon when the world opens up and allows that to happen. So stay tuned. Much love to everyone. We'll see you tomorrow morning for Mid-City Casa Apocalyptica. Lots of inspiration and gardens. Thank you for being here with us. We'll see you tomorrow night, everybody.
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. We'll see you tomorrow morning.